Everyone has their own opinion on which season of Fortnite was the best. For me, it was Season 9. The loot pool had some of the most accurate and reliable guns of all time, such as the tactical assault rifle and the combat shotgun. Mobility was at an all-time high, with the slipstream allowing for quick traversal, and we also had two of the most balanced and creative vehicles to grace the game, with those being the Baller and the Driftboard. Wix Bounty gave us one of the most well-executed crossover events that also included a fun and innovative game mode. There was a fleshed-out challenge and progression system with daily fort bites that inched us ever closer to more compelling rewards, and finally, there was an alluring story brewing in the background, with the incredibly customizable Singularity skin as a worthy end-season reward for completing all the weekly challenges and collecting all the fort bites. This culminated with a truly epic final showdown between the monster Caddis and Mecha Team Leader. Whichever season was your favorite, I'm sure you can list a myriad of reasons why, like I have with Season 9. However, it is hard for anyone to argue the same with Season 10, and it is near impossible with this first season of Chapter 2. While there have been some small glimmers of fun within this season, the game has ultimately begun to stagnate. I believe there are many factors at play in Fortnite's decline, and it's not just that the game has gotten old. Deliberate choices made by Epic's lead developers and higher-ups have maimed this game so severely that it is quickly losing the interest and loyalty of its dedicated player base. With the next season on the horizon, now seemed like an ideal time to talk about the dismal state of Fortnite and how Epic, the Fortnite dev team, and the company as a whole could act to save this failing game. And before I start, I want to clarify this is somewhat speculative and very much my opinion, but us gamers have pretty good opinions when it comes to the games we love to play, so hear me out. So there are many things that need to be done to save the game. The first, and one of most important, is the reversal of forced cross-platform play. I won't spend too much time arguing why it should be removed in this video, as I have a whole video dedicated to that, which you can go watch if you're interested in hearing my arguments. What I will say here is that forced cross-platform is definitely unfair, and from the literal hundreds of thousands of console players I have seen complaining about this issue and declaring their loss of investment in the game, it's causing dedicated console players to quit the game in droves. When dedicated players stop playing, they take their money with them too. I would say it's safe to assume that forced cross-platform is resulting in huge profit losses from Fortnite's largest audience, which is their console players. This is bad for players across all platforms because a loss in profitability in a game will only further lower Epic's investment in updating the game, keeping it fresh and exciting. And I still hope that Epic might eventually reverse this poor choice, but if I knew today that forced cross-platform was never going away, I would just completely stop playing this game, and I know many console players share the same sentiment. So first things first, get rid of forced cross-platform, and maybe give a sincere apology to console players for putting them through this awful mess of a decision for more than 3 months at this point. This leads into the next way to save Fortnite, which is for Epic to have more open and transparent communication with the community like they used to. The outcry against forced cross-platform on the official Fortnite BR subreddit has been so consistent and prevalent over the last few months that there has been 3 mega threads created for that very issue. So far, we haven't heard a single genuine response from the devs over at Epic on what they are planning to do about it. Other points of contention include skill-based matchmaking, the addition of bots, and the lack of mobility. And people will always have issues with the game, and some of those are more valid than others, but it's Epic's responsibility as a live service provider to be open with their community about all changes to the game and to engage in dialogues with their dedicated players. One of the major reasons we are in this hot mess of a season is because Epic has largely cut off this sincere communication with the community. It is alright for Epic to take risks like they did with the mech in Season 10 or with skill-based matchmaking this season. What is not alright is when Epic makes a risky decision that proves to be detrimental to the game as a whole and then ignores the outpouring of player feedback about that poor decision, which is what has been happening since the start of Season 10. So before we move on to more issues with the actual game, we need to talk about the Epic Game Store. Epic recently released some info about profits from the Epic Game Store this last year, and I'll leave a link to a great video discussing those reports. But taking all the info together, it seems that the Epic Game Store has not made a whole lot of money outside of the profits from Fortnite. Meanwhile, they have been spending millions of dollars on acquiring exclusive titles for their store to compete with Steam. So instead of taking the money they made from Fortnite and investing it back into further development and innovation for Fortnite, they spent it on exclusive deals with Borderlands 3, Metro Exodus, The Outer Worlds, etc. And according to that recent report, they plan to continue this wasteful spending into 2020. All I can say is Epic's endeavors with the Epic Game Store is draining the profits from Fortnite, diverting funds from their flagship game, and what I would call a failed experiment of a storefront. So what Epic should do, if they were smart, is to maybe forget about the Epic Game Store and focus funding and dev efforts back into Fortnite, which is what originally made the company into the giant they are today. Okay, now we can talk more about the actual game and what's wrong with it and how we can maybe fix it. So one of the biggest problems with the game right now is the balancing around XP gains from the different game modes. By now you might have noticed that Team Rumble is the most efficient mode to play if you're trying to gain XP and level up. You get at least 3 to 4 times as much XP in a Rumble match compared to a match in any of the standard modes like solos or squads. Even if you are consistently winning in the standard modes, you will not be getting even close to the XP you could be getting in Team Rumble. This is completely backwards and dissuades players from playing the standard modes. The reason why this sucks is because at their best, the core modes have so much more potential for excitement, challenge, and reward over Team Rumble. If you're trying to level up, say reach level 350 for that full red and black scratch skin, you'll be forced to grind Rumble matches over playing the standard modes in order to get it. Epic could easily fix this issue by giving a significant amount of XP for outlasting opponents or for surviving to later stages in the game, or just make XP gains greater for actions completed in the standard modes. However they choose to solve the problem, standard game modes should be giving out at least as much XP, if not significantly more XP, relative to Team Rumble. Another major issue with the game is the lack of new and interesting content, items, and updates to the map. The only new permanent item we have gotten this whole season is the harpoon gun. It's a good addition, but is that really it? We also got lightsabers and blasters with the Star Wars crossover event, but those were only temporary. Not only are more new additions needed, but why not bring back some of the old items that were taken out? The launch pad is something we could really use, ballers, those would be great, or why not even bring back the ATKs? Whether through bringing back those from the past or inventing new ones to add in, the game needs some creative new items to stir up the gameplay. Some new additions to the map, like we saw with the slipstreams in Season 9, would also go a long way in keeping gameplay fresh and interesting. This feeds into the next major issue that needs fixing, the mobility. So I get that they were going for maybe slower paced matches, but the lack of mobility this season is ridiculous. Boats and water simply do not provide adequate means of traversing the map. So much of the map is a no-go for landing simply because it is near the perimeter of the island and would require one to make impossible treks across the enormous landscape. Simple additions, like just bringing back the ATK, would open up the map by giving players the mobility they desperately need to outrun the storm. The launchpad would allow players to get out of a low ground situation or give them a better opportunity to storm players or squads camping in high ground positions. However it is accomplished, more mobility would be a welcomed improvement to the game as it is now. Not only has the gameplay taken on a slower pace this season, but the season itself has been drawn out and the release of new content and events slowed to a trickle. Just enough content to incite FOMO and bring you back for a daily login. In Season 9, all of the Overtime Challenge skins were available in the same week and they required the completion of a single set of challenges. Now, each overtime skin is spaced out over a week or two, and each skin requires completion of its own set of tedious challenges. Seasons used to be 9 to 11 weeks long, this one has been a whopping 17. That wouldn't be an issue if it had more content to fill in those extra weeks, but if anything, this has been the least eventful season and the least plentiful in terms of new original content. One reason might be Epic's new focus on crossover events for the game, like we saw with the Star Wars crossover, how much time and planning and development went into that event for it all just to be limited time changes and additions to the game. I would argue that we'd be better off with dev time and resources going into original content and additions to the game, content that isn't limited to a specific time frame, content that is more permanent to the game and changes gameplay in meaningful ways. The kind of content I was referring to was Season 9, where we got monster mech boss fights and slipstreams in the game, ballers, driftboards, new locations, dramatic changes to the map, and more. Epic should be focusing efforts on new original content for the game rather than gimmicky and ultra-temporary crossover events like we saw with Star Wars. Now on to another point, I do think crossovers could be done right. We saw that with the Wix Bounty event in Season 9 as a good example, and an important part of that was that it had its own game mode. I think it's kind of weird that we didn't get an LTM with the Star Wars event, like maybe TIE Fighters versus X-Wings, or if you want to go even more simple, Jedi versus Sith, which could just use the lightsabers that we already have, with clone and rebel troopers as blaster shooting AI. All we got for the Star Wars event was the addition of lightsabers and blasters to the regular loot pool, with the blasters being somewhat useless and the lightsabers being more annoying obstacles than awesome lightsabers. These items should have gotten their own limited time mode, and I think it was a big missed opportunity that they didn't. Something else that would breathe new life into Fortnite would be a dedicated team deathmatch mode that is on a smaller scale than Rumble. Think of like a 4v4 mode with respawning enabled, where the first team to reach 50 points wins the match. All players start with a standard rifle and shotgun and some materials, jump into a small pre-selected zone on the map and battle it out. This would be so much more fun and more competitive than Team Rumble, which is more like a big team battle, super casual mode. As a squad, you could go into a traditional squads game mode or into this new and more traditional shooter game mode. I'm almost positive that we actually had this as an LTM at one point, and I'd really like to see it return. Air Royale was another incredible LTM that I would love to see return as its own more permanent mode. The point of this is I think it'd do the game some good if it could have some new interesting modes that were main modes in the game that could always be accessed. Finally, we should talk about skill-based matchmaking. One of the major issues with skill-based matchmaking in the core modes is that you don't see any tangible results or incentive for improving and being matched against more difficult opponents. If skill-based matchmaking was accompanied by some visible rank and tangible cosmetic rewards that could be shown off, which is what Rocket League does with rewards for each tier of skill, those being bronze, silver, gold, and more, then players would actually be motivated to get better at the game and compete with more difficult opponents to obtain more prestigious rewards. In addition to those competitive playlists, there could be the standard, non-skill based matchmaking playlist like we originally had before Chapter 2. The point is, skill-based matchmaking, as it is now, is not an option and mostly punishes players for performing very well, where this new optional system with explicit ranking of players could incentivize player participation with tiered cosmetic rewards for players at all different skill levels. Oh, and cross-platform should be optional in all of these playlists too. If there are wait times to get into matches at higher rankings, then that is a fair price to pay for fair competition. I haven't figured out how or if the arena modes with forced cross-platform would fit into this new system, but I have to believe that it would be better overall than the system we currently have. For the players that are extremely new and would maybe suffer in any of these playlists, perhaps there should be an all-bot mode as a training option for new players and their friends, but this mode wouldn't count as or grant as much XP as the normal modes. Now I know what some of you are probably thinking, that all these modes I am listing off would saturate the playlists in the game and would spread the player base too thin. All I can say in regards to that is look at Rocket League. I'm almost positive they have less concurrent players than Fortnite, although that might change if Fortnite continues down its current path. And with less players, they have way more modes. They have around 12 playlists at all times. Some might be less populated than others, but if you're willing to wait a little, you can still get into decent matches for any of those 12 modes. So as far as spreading the player base too thin, I think Fortnite would be fine with the 4 to 5 additional modes I have mentioned, plus the crossover and other limited time modes they might make available from time to time. My thought is also that if there were a larger variety of permanent modes that players could dedicate themselves to, like a 4v4 team deathmatch and an Air Royale mode, that the game would attract a larger and wider audience, which will actually result in a more robust player base. I just wish that Epic was willing to at least take some of those risks and see if they pan out. And I can only imagine that a large chunk of dev time and money would be needed to bring about all of these changes to the game, but when Epic is throwing millions of dollars away on the failed Epic Game Store, it's hard to justify not putting in the effort and money into improving Fortnite, which has made the company billions. So that's it for this very long video. If you made it to this point, I want to give you an extra big thanks for watching. I'm curious to hear what you think about the game right now and about the changes I've put forward. And if you have thoughts of your own on how to improve the game, I would love to hear those too. If you want to see more Fortnite discussion videos or just Fortnite in general, I'll leave a few good videos at the end of this video, or you can head over to my channel where all those videos are hanging out. And if you're new, consider subscribing. You're helping me to feed my cat. Her name's Marshmallow. I'll leave it there. Have a great day. If you're here today, have a great Wednesday. And as always, thanks for watching.